Not everyone could be saved, and once that decision was made, humanity began to divide itself. This is Project Anoxia, Chapter 7, Prioritized Breathing. The first official restriction was not called a restriction. It was called guidance. At 600 UTC, a coordinated global advisory was released across multiple governments. It appeared simultaneously, translated into dozens of languages, delivered through every available channel. The message was clear. Limit physical activity, remain indoors, conserve energy, avoid unnecessary exertion. It did not mention oxygen. It did not need to. By 6:20, people understood. Movement felt different now. Walking required pacing. Talking required pauses. Breathing required attention. At 700 UTC, the term began circulating unofficially. Air fatigue. At 7:30 UTC, hospitals stopped pretending. Oxygen rationing became visible. Masks were removed from some patients, given to others. No explanations, no apologies, just decisions. At 8:10 UTC, a nurse recorded a note in a patient file. Stable, but low priority. The patient was still conscious, still aware, still breathing. Barely. At 8:45 UTC, a closed government session escalated classification again, from managed crisis to National Preservation Protocol. The distinction was not shared publicly. At 9:15 UTC, a directive was issued. Critical personnel were to be identified, protected, prioritized. Lists were created, not publicly, included senior officials, strategic industry leaders, selected scientific personnel, excluded most others. At 9:50 UTC, private transport corridors were secured, routes cleared, restricted access enforced. Movement became uneven. Some areas emptied, others filled. At 10:20 UTC, Layla Rahmani's access badge stopped working. No explanation. She remained inside. No one asked her to leave. No one asked her to stay. At 10:45 UTC, she reviewed her notes again, not to understand, but to confirm. There was no reversal point, no stabilization threshold, only progression. At 11:10 UTC, the unknown gas concentration reached a new level, still not lethal, but no longer ignorable. It settled faster now. Lower areas became uncomfortable, then unusable. At 11:45 UTC, the first building evacuation occurred, not due to fire, not due to damage, due to air. Upper floors filled, lower floors emptied. At 12:20 UTC, a message circulated privately among emergency responders. Stay above ground level when possible. At 1300 UTC, the 8th public broadcast aired. It was different, short, direct. Citizens are advised to relocate to higher elevations where feasible. Limit time in enclosed or low-lying areas. Further instructions will follow. No reassurance, no denial. At 1330 UTC, the response was immediate. People moved, upward. Stairwells filled, elevators overloaded, rooftops occupied. At 14:05 UTC, the first fall occurred. A man collapsed while climbing stairs. He did not get up. Others stepped around him, not out of cruelty, out of necessity. At 14:40 UTC, transportation systems halted almost completely. Not enough staff, not enough capacity. People moved on foot, slowly. At 15:10 UTC, a conflict broke out on a rooftop. Limited space, too many people, no weapons, just force. Someone was pushed. No one looked down. At 15:45 UTC, Layla received another message. They're separating. She understood. At 16:10 UTC, secure facilities activated internal life support systems, filtered air, controlled environments. Access was restricted. At 16:40 UTC, the first attempt to breach one of these facilities occurred. Uncoordinated, desperate. Security responded. The outcome was not reported. At 1720 UTC, hospitals began relocating patients vertically. Those who could move, moved. Those who could not, stayed. At 1800 UTC, the difference between priority and non-priority became visible, not through announcements, through access. Some doors opened, others did not. At 1835 UTC, the acoustic pattern returned. 32 seconds, more defined. Repetition within repetition, almost instructional. No system acknowledged it. At 1910 UTC, a scientist in a restricted facility asked a question. Why is it structured? No one answered. At 1945 UTC, atmospheric levels dropped again. Not sharply, but enough. Breathing became effort. At 2020 UTC, public behavior changed. Less movement, less speaking, energy conserved, instinctively. At 2100 UTC, the first coordinated violence occurred. Not random, targeted. A group attempted to take control of a supply point. Resistance met them. The outcome was decisive. At 2140 UTC, similar events followed. Different locations, same pattern. Resources were no longer shared. They were taken. At 2215 UTC, Layla stopped reading incoming data entirely. Not because it was wrong, but because it was complete. At 2300 UTC, emergency services no longer existed as a system, only as individuals. Some still helped, others did not. At 2340 UTC, a final internal directive circulated. Short, clear. Preserve function where possible. No definition of function. Oxygen levels dropped again. Atmospheric, oceanic. The unknown gas increased, faster, heavier. At 100 UTC, lower elevations became uninhabitable. At 200 UTC, upper levels filled beyond capacity. At 300 UTC, breathing was no longer automatic. It was a decision. Thanks for listening to Chapter 7, Prioritize Breathing. If you like our show, please subscribe and share with your friends and family. Once everyone knows, everything changes. Continue to Chapter 8. This has been a Last Echo Archive production.